Destiny's PvP has been through some amazing times and some pretty dark eras. Some might say that we're in the darkest of times right now, but things were definitely not always this way. I wanted to take a look back at some of the best and worst times in Destiny's history from the lens of a nostalgic PvP player, one who spent thousands of hours grinding out Redrick's Claymore, Not Forgotten, early trials, and many of the best times that this game has ever experienced. If you're a newer Destiny player, you might have noticed an upward trend in the usage of double primary weapons in modes where special ammo isn't as readily available. Well, what if I told you this is definitely not the first time we've seen this? When Destiny 2 was first released in September of 2017, it really wasn't much of a choice. Special ammo didn't even exist yet. The time to kill was much longer than what we see today, and the weapons we're accustomed to in the special slot, like shotguns, fusion rifles, and snipers, were confined to the heavy ammo slot. So if you didn't have any of that purple ammo around, your primary was your only option for gunfights. This led to naturally longer engagements and team fights where you'd see teams laning together and team shotting every single battle. One weapon pairing that will forever define the meta of early Destiny 2 was the Mida multi-tool and Uriel's Gift. Mida was a scout rifle brought back from Destiny 1 that boosted your movement speed, gave you radar while you're aiming down sights, and dealt some solid damage at medium to long ranges. The flinch you received from getting shot by the scout rifle was so bad that engagements often boiled down to a game of who got the shot off first. What would happen if someone managed to close the distance and make Mida a little bit less useful? Well, then it was time for Uriel's Gift. This energy slot auto rifle was extremely stable and had access to high impact reserves, which sped up the time to kill once you reached the bottom of the magazine. This was an incredibly popular pairing in the early game mode Trials of the Nine. While primary weapons were definitely the bread and butter of PvP, a few heavy weapons stood out from everything else. Sins of the Past was a rocket launcher acquired from the Leviathan raid, and it came packed with a huge blast radius and cluster bombs. This combination, paired with the slower movement speed and lack of movement abilities in vanilla Destiny 2, nearly guaranteed you a kill or even a multi-kill every time you picked up heavy, so long as you didn't blow yourself up in the process. Grenade launchers were also fairly popular too, with play of the game being a top choice for rapid multi-kills. And although they weren't offering up quite as free of a kill, snipers and shotguns were still pretty popular, even though back then they required heavy ammo to use them. I personally loved Alone as a God and the Maxim 11 for sniping. These were popular because very few snipers featured snapshot to speed up the zoom-in process those days, and back in vanilla Destiny 1, every weapon was statically rolled, so when a weapon dropped, you always got the exact same perks. Snipers in early Destiny also had this obnoxious scope sway when moving, where the center reticle would bounce around terribly. Alone as a God and Maxim both had among the least of this effect, which is one of the reasons they were both so popular among sniper mains. While you're grinding through the competitive ranks of Destiny, it's important to take good care of yourself so that you can play your best. You know, stay hydrated, take breaks to rest up and refresh, but also stay on top of your nutrition. It's too easy to accidentally skip a meal or eat a bunch of junk food when you're laser focused on grinding a game. I've tried many of the various meal prep services over the years to help make this job a little bit easier, and some have been pretty good, but my favorite overall has been Cook Unity. They have a slightly different approach to meal delivery where they connect you directly with a group of personal chefs. It's the first chef-to-consumer platform where a team of award-winning chefs cook delicious meals fresh every day in regional micro kitchens, instead of those huge warehouse production facilities that you see from other services. Cook Unity's roster of all-star chefs includes Food Network alums, James Beard Award winners, and acclaimed restaurateurs. You can select from over 350 chef-created meals that are fully cooked, ready to eat, and prepared with fresh ingredients, nothing artificial. And they use humanely raised meats and organic ingredients whenever possible. They also have plenty of options for different diet types, so whether you're eating paleo, gluten-free, vegan, or any other dietary restriction, you have plenty of options. My favorites from my most recent box were the Black Pepper Beef Pad Thai and Thai Penang Curry with Beef by Chef Stacey Barang. I love Thai food, and this was every bit as good as my local Thai place, but much cheaper than paying for delivery and tips. Also, the blackened ribeye from Chef Chris Rattel was excellent and featured some really high quality steak just like I would get in my local butcher shop. If you want to try it out, the subscription is super flexible and they let you pause, skip weeks, or cancel at any time. Just go to cookunity.com/pattycakes50 or click the link in the description and use my code pattycakes50 to get 50% off your first order of Cook Unity meals to try them out for yourself. Thanks to Cook Unity for sponsoring the video, and let's get back to some more Destiny PvP history. There were a handful of popular shotguns as well, but perhaps the most loved among the sweaty Destiny PvP player community was actually a blue weapon, the Botheration Mark 28. It had flat out one of the best one-hit kill distances in the game, much better than a lot of the legendary options. It might be surprising to hear this if you've been playing Destiny a while but not at the very beginning, but back in vanilla Destiny, hand cannons weren't quite as popular as they are today. There were a few standouts though that got attention from the Crucible fans. Better Devils was one of the first hand cannons to feature explosive payload, which would shake your screen like crazy whenever you got hit. This was a trend that has continued to be a go-to perk on many hand cannons ever since Destiny's launch. Dire Promise on paper didn't have perks that seemed too PvP oriented, but despite this, it became one of the favorite weapons among hand cannon mains in early Destiny. It was one of the game's first lightweight framed hand cannons that fired at 150 RPM. This provided a faster time to kill than Better Devils, and more importantly, it gave you a buff to movement speed. Midnight Coup was much more respected in the PvE environment with its classic perk combination of Outlaw for reload speed and Rampage for a damage boost. However, with the feel of the gun alone, along with the lightweight frame and the ability to stack up some damage with Rampage, it became pretty popular in early PvP as well. And I couldn't wrap up this section without at least mentioning an extremely popular sidearm in vanilla Destiny 2. Last Hope gained some notoriety in the Crucible with its quick 3-round burst and superb stability that made it really deadly up close. SMGs back then weren't nearly as effective as they are in today's sandbox, and shotguns were once again confined to the heavy slot, which meant that sidearms like Last Hope really didn't have much to compete with when you were in close quarters. As the launch season of Destiny 2 came to a close, many players were wondering if the new expansion released in December of 2017, Curse of Osiris, would fix the issues that the community had voiced. And spoiler alert, it didn't. Curse of Osiris barely moved the needle for many players, and maybe the least for those who remained in the Crucible. The metas that had dominated for the previous 3 months remained except for a game-breakingly bugged trace rifle, an exotic hand cannon, and a grenade launcher that delivered so much pain that luckily only a few players remember it. Prometheus Lens burned brightly, albeit shortly, with its release. For one weekend, which is now famously dubbed the laser tag weekend, this exotic trace rifle dealt way more damage than intended, and allowed players to delete one another in the blink of an eye. While this meta lasted only a few days, it remains one of the most prominent memories in this early era of Destiny. Another exotic introduced during this time was the hand cannon Crimson. It was given the role of Red Death at home, and was supposed to be a hybrid of a hand cannon and the Destiny 1 pulse rifle that the community loved. Its unique perk Cruel Remedy healed players on precision kills and refilled the magazine. Crimson's never been a weapon to truly define the Crucible, although it's had some eras of increased popularity. It's always been somewhat hindered by its efficacy depending on what your input method is. However, in this primary weapon era, Crimson's exotic perk allowed players to sustain their killing sprees as they constantly healed up and never had to reload. There was also a little bit of an underground meta that was perhaps the most frustrating thing to play against in this entire era. Orwing's Maul was a breech-loaded grenade launcher from the Iron Banner with the perk Concussion Grenades. For those of you unfortunate enough to remember the pain that this thing inflicted, I'm sorry for re-triggering this memory. You'd effectively get stun locked every time the grenade would hit you, and you would just wait for the death screen to pop back up. Overall, Curse of Osiris was a remarkably lackluster expansion that left the remaining player base with heavy doubts about the game's future. That's even with the third expansion, Warmind, on the horizon. With the release of the Warmind expansion in May of 2018, Destiny 2 PvP entered a much brighter era. The developers announced a new twist on the competitive mode with a proper ladder system and rewards for those brave enough to climb up the ranks. It also began a period where abilities would be much more effective in the Crucible thanks to the recent Go Fast update from just a few months prior to this expansion dropping. Undoubtedly, a few weapons really made their mark, however, this was also the first time players started to see the effects of their armor and subclasses severely impacting gameplay, especially at the higher end of PvP. Among the weapons that rose to prominence during this era, the SMG Antiope D and the Graviton Lance Pulse Rifle were at the forefront, basically becoming the new version of the old Mida and Uriel combo. Antiope D was a monster all on its own. It was actually released in Season 1, but after some retuning, SMGs started to become much more popular. This 600 RPM precision frame had some of the highest range that SMGs could achieve, it featured ricochet rounds and kill clip, and became a staple for players who favored a more aggressive playstyle. Graviton Lance had just received a major rework buff, and it excelled in medium range engagements with its 2-burst firing mode. Void explosions would spawn on kills, and the new catalyst boosted up the aim assist. Together, these two weapons created a versatile loadout that could handle basically any range on the map. If you weren't a fan of Graviton though, another pulse rifle became extremely popular as well. Vigilance Wing was the first and only 5-run burst pulse rifle capable of 2 bursting enemies. It also staggered your aim quite a bit with the onslaught of bullets bouncing you around. The exotic perk increased your health regeneration and movement speed and significantly improved the range, stability, and handling when you were the last living member of your fire team. This made it a go-to choice for many players during this period in the competitive modes. And just like Graviton had Antiope to pair with it, Vigilance Wing had its own favorite SMG partner. The new Ikelos SMG from Warmind had great range and felt so easy to use that it was a perfect pairing with the Vigilance Wing for times it called for close quarters fighting. Remember, this was still in an era where shotguns were confined to the heavy slot, so a good SMG could really help you out in fights. While weapons always played a significant role in shaping metas, abilities and exotic armor would soon begin to take the spotlight. Titan skating became all the rage on PC, which was performed by binding your jump to either a macro or your scroll wheel, and it allowed players to zoom across the map at speeds that would rival a sparrow. Combining this movement technique with Syntheseps for boosted melee range and damage turned Titans into melee-focused powerhouses that allowed for highly aggressive and unpredictable play, especially at a time where movement and ability skill ceilings were still being discovered. However, Titans were definitely not the only class to become the problem child. The release of Warmind gave hunters a new helmet that would effectively ruin the Crucible until its rework. The original Wormhusk crown gave hunters instant health regeneration instead of just the small bump that you see today. Combining this helmet with the Arcstrider subclass and more specifically focused breathing, where sprinting would recharge your dodge ability, gave hunters a get out of jail free card for nearly every single engagement. This was a much bigger pain point back in this period because the time to kill was much longer and health regeneration was slower. So with Wormhusk Crown, hunters could re-engage you significantly faster wearing the helmet. Both of these playstyles became extremely frustrating to face in the competitive mode, where many players spend hours and hours of their lives chasing down the infamous Redrix's Claymore. This was the first ever competitive pinnacle reward for reaching the fabled rank in the Crucible. With the brand new perk Desperado, you could get a headshot kill and reload and then melt the entire enemy team. The ranking system back in Season 3 was brutally difficult, featuring lost streaks that would wipe away an entire week's worth of points gains in a single afternoon. Only a small fraction of players ever reached Fabled and beyond, making it one of the most rare weapons in Destiny history. As the Warmind era drew to a close, Destiny 2 was in kind of an odd state. Things were much better than in Curse of Osiris, but endgame PvE was kind of unengaging, and there were huge balance problems in the PvP landscape that left veterans pretty frustrated. But just around the corner was perhaps the largest shakeup of Destiny in its entire 10-year history. The Forsaken expansion marked a turning point for Destiny 2, bringing a significant overhaul to the game's sandbox and introducing a wealth of new content that would dramatically alter the PvE and PvP landscape. It brought new subclass trees and supers, the reintroduction of special weapons, and tons of new exotics to chase. Forsaken set the stage for one of the most dynamic and controversial periods in Destiny's PvP history. Unlike Warmind, where hunters and titans got the majority of the power in the Crucible, Forsaken brought armors and abilities that allowed each class to have their own overpowered combinations. Warlocks gained access to a new roaming super called Nova Warp, which would transform them into nearly unkillable bursts of void energy. This tree also allowed Warlocks to change their grenades into handheld supernova. This ability allowed Warlocks to unleash a powerful short-range burst of void energy and became infamous for its one-shot kill potential. The controversial exotic gauntlets enhanced this ability even further by reducing the incoming damage while charging up, and also returning grenade energy on a successful hit. This created a vicious cycle of power and frustration for those on the receiving end. Hunters were given the new Blade Barrage super with the introduction of Forsaken, which became an instantly popular choice because of its high damage, multi-target capability, and activation speed. When paired with the Shards of Galanor exotic gauntlets, which refunded super energy based on hits and kills, its uptime became one of the highest in the game. With a successful volley, you could nearly get your entire super back instantly. If you didn't feel like playing a Solar Hunter, you could instead equip the new Void Super Spectral Blades and the Guizan Vest, which extended your super timer with each kill to give you a powerful roaming super that lasted basically forever. It wasn't uncommon for players to be killed 2 or even 3 times from the same super activation. Titans were definitely not forgotten as well, with one of the most overpowered exotics in the entire history of the game, the One-Eyed Mask. This exotic helmet granted wall hacks whenever someone would damage you, which gave you an instant advantage in the duel. If you won that fight, then you were granted an overshield and a damage bonus to carry into your next duel. The snowballing that would occur from this helmet alone caused massive outcry from the player base, and things only got worse when paired with any of the weapons that defined this era. Titans also got the Ursa Furiosa helmet, which allowed them to recharge a ton of their super energy when they popped their banner shield to soak up damage. So for players facing these Ursa Titans, you basically either had to just run away or you'd be feeding their next super even faster. Besides the abilities and armor introduced with Forsaken, this expansion also brought some of the most overpowered and notorious weapons in the game's history, with a healthy amount of them coming in the form of hand cannons. The Ace of Spades is Cade's signature hand cannon and the former Hunter exclusive weapon from Destiny 1, and it became a staple weapon of the Crucible. The combination of Memento Mori, which grants bonus damage after a kill, a persistent radar even when aiming on sights, and Firefly, which caused massive explosions and increased reload speed on precision kills, made this weapon a dueling monster, especially in mid-range engagements. Luna's Howl was a pinnacle weapon obtained from the lengthy Crucible quest in reaching the Fabled rank in competitive, just like Redrick's Claymore was from the previous season. It quickly became a top tier weapon because of its unique perk Magnificent Howl, which increased the damage after landing 2 precision shots. This allowed skilled players to secure a consistent 3-tap kill. And this was a big deal because Luna's used to be a 180 RPM hand cannon, not 140 like we see today. So if you could land your shots, you had one of the fastest time to kill weapons in the entire game. Plus, if you used your shots wisely, you could achieve a 2-tap with the powered up bullets for a blistering fast time to kill. However, we can't bring up Luna's Howl without also mentioning its cooler and older sibling, Not Forgotten. This was the pinnacle reward for completing an even longer Crucible quest once you obtained Luna's Howl, and had the added caveat of reaching the Legend rank in competitive play. Functionally, this hand cannon worked just like Luna's with Magnificent Howl, except Not Forgotten had quite a bit more range, making it even more lethal. Both of these hand cannons sparked a major debate in the Destiny community about the fairness of having such powerful weapons locked behind a ranked ladder system. Some argued that it was a win more situation for those who were good enough to earn them, and those same players would be gatekeeping against those who were on the brink but not quite able to complete the quest. At the same time though, they offered such a huge incentive for players to participate in PvP that we saw some of the highest player engagement rates in Destiny's Crucible history. The seasons that followed Forsaken's launch also featured some weapons that became incredibly popular among PvP players. The Le Monarch bow introduced in Black Armory was an exotic bow with the unique ability to poison targets with a damage over time effect, and rendered all forms of healing useless for a short time. This bow became even more potent when combined with the Hunter Gauntlet's Oathkeepers, which allowed users to shoot the poison arrow every single time for free without any skill timing required. Its power to take targets out of the fight and apply pressure to teams went unchecked for nearly 5 years, becoming one of the most controversial weapons in the game. If you were looking for a hand cannon to dominate close range engagements, look no further than the Last Word, one of the most infamous weapons in Destiny history. Its fast rate of fire and high damage profile was second to none in the hands of a skilled player, especially those on mouse and keyboard where the aim down sight recoil was much more easily managed. Later on, it was changed to be effectively a hipfire only weapon, but for the first several months of its reintroduction into Destiny 2, it was basically a hand cannon shaped machine gun in ADS mode. The 150 RPM lightweight frame spare rations came from Season of the Drifter. While it didn't feature a perk as dominant as Magnificent Howl, it was stacked with handling and range boosting perks, making it a reliable and consistent option for casual and competitive players. With the right setup, it could outrange nearly every other hand cannon in the game while still hitting a great time to kill. Hand cannons were especially popular during this time because of the reintroduction of special weapons and the thriving ammo economy. Shotguns that sported handling and range perks like the Dustrock Blues and Mindbender's Ambition were among the top names in the Crucible, to the point where the name Spare Benders became common terminology for spare rations and Mindbenders in combination. This shotgun hand cannon combo with a high mobility class like a hunter wearing stompy boots dominated the more competitive sides of the Crucible for many years in various iterations. Honorable mentions could be made for the beloved sniper rifle, which was introduced during Season of Opulence and had an incredibly snappy feel. It was heaping with aim assist, making it particularly deadly in competitive modes. It became my personal favorite sniper in Destiny history, along with many other players who loved to snipe. We also had a brief period where certain fused rifles were effectively shooting like sniper rifles. Air and Tilt in particular could be stacked with perks that would allow for some absolutely insane kills across the map. This wasn't a mega common playstyle compared to Spare Benders or the Last Word Sniper, but players who love to VOOP from long ranges will never forget some of the snipes they landed with their favorite fusions during this era. Forsaken's influence on PvP was profound. The expansion set the stage for future metas and completely broke the mold of what the game had become in year 1. Many players look back at this period of Destiny 2 PvP as the glory years, and personally I think I would agree. It had an incredible amount of busted exotic armor and ability combos, yet it was a time where many Destiny fans could not get enough of the PvP sandbox. Shadowkeep, released in October of 2019, was Bungie's first independent expansion. Prior expansions were released under the supervision of Activision, but with the Bungie split, this was their opportunity to show what they could do as a studio. Starting things off, we have 2 weapons that were actually introduced in Forsaken. You might wonder why they're included in the Shadowkeep section, and that's because their dominance in the Crucible really didn't take off until a few months after their release. The Mountaintop Grenade Launcher and Recluse SMG were pinnacle weapons that were once obtained from the fairly demanding Crucible quest and the competitive mode. These two weapons were each somewhat slept on when they were first released, but when players realized how powerful they could be when used in combination, they completely took over the game in both PvE and PvP. The Mountaintop was a primary slot weapon, and it was unique in that it didn't function like any other grenade launcher that we had seen at this point. Instead of firing bouncy projectiles like we were used to, it fired a micro missile at high speeds and in a straight line. The high damage output in PvP could nearly take out an enemy just with splash damage, leaving them only a sliver of health remaining. The perfect synergy with this grenade launcher was the Reckless SMG with the perk Master of Arms. This gave you a significant damage bonus whenever you got a kill with it or with any other weapon in your loadout. Combining these two weapons together allowed for chain kills almost effortlessly and became extremely oppressive in the hands of more skilled players. The effectiveness in both sandboxes seemed to be a driving force behind Bungie's first wave of sunsetting, as this combo had power crept nearly every other weapon out of usefulness. The weapons that defined the remainder of this expansion weren't nearly up to the level of Mountaintop and Recluse, but they still did make their mark. For a brief period of time, Hardlight saw itself in the spotlight of the Crucible meta. A recent buff to the damage profile of 600 RPM auto rifles made this weapon shine because its exotic perk allowed the gun to have 0 damage fall off over range and improved ricochet rounds. The versatility of Hardlight wasn't fully realized until one weekend of trials where the map was staged to be Anomaly. The narrow halls and tight corners of the map brought havoc to the community as the strategy for the weekend devolved into just hold the trigger down and spray bullets at the wall. Hardlight's weekend was soon overshadowed by an infamous shotgun in Destiny 1 that made a big return to Destiny 2. Felwinter's Lie featured a unique new perk called Shot Package, which tightened the pellet spread of the shot. This was baked into the framework of the weapon itself. This tighter spread, combined with the original quick draw handling perk and range boosting perks like opening shot, made it the most consistent and hated shotgun in PvP. The abundance of special ammo in the game effectively guaranteed that more high skilled players could run around and getting free kills in close range engagements. Following Felwinter's nerf, the Chaperone arose from the ashes to take its place as the premier shotgun in PvP. Players could engage at longer ranges than any other shotgun because of the slugs that were fired by the gun and its exotic perk Roadborne. This extended the effective range after a precision kill. The high skill ceiling rewarded accuracy and became a top choice for more skilled players. This allowed them to quickly chain kills together once Roadborne was active. The one-hit kill range of this perk was absolutely insane during this period of Destiny. During the Season of Arrivals, a new exotic grenade launcher, the Witherhoard, would debut. Witherhoard introduced a new form of area denial to the Crucible with its Blight effect, which left a high damaging pool on the ground, killing anyone who was trapped in the goo. It promptly became a staple for players who were looking to control entire areas of the map, deny revives, or quickly punish those who found themselves in choke points. Special ammo even back then was limited in PvP, so special weapons would need to be paired with a primary weapon. And once again, we saw the rise of 600 RPM auto rifles. This time, Hardlight was replaced with a well-rounded Void auto rifle acquired from the Drifter, the Gnawing Hunger. For a time, the Gnawing Hunger was to auto rifles what Spare Rations was to hand cannons. It wasn't really a single perk that you could point your finger at, but instead a combination of many aspects that made it so desirable. It was a reliable, good-feeling weapon for players across all different skill levels, with perks allowing for more aggressive or passive play depending on the map and your preferences. With the right build, you could obtain ludicrous time to kill values and chain some crazy kill streaks together. While the weapons of Shadowkeep's PvP era would be notable in their own right, no one was prepared for the sudden change to the completely ability-dominated meta that Beyond Light would bring with the new subclass Stasis. The release of Beyond Light brought a new era of abilities to Destiny 2 with the first ever Darkness subclass Stasis and our first introduction into the 3.0 subclass system. This was a huge departure from the tree system players had grown accustomed to since the Destiny 2 launch, and was more kindred to the grid-style subclass customization of Destiny 1. The PvP landscape would once again be redefined as this new power ushered in the era of abilities over weapons. The Stasis release introduced a new level of gameplay disruption never before seen in the Crucible. Abilities such as Shatter Dive, Cryoclasm, and Ice Flare bolts stood out among a kit of powerful aspects and fragments with the ability to instantly freeze and kill opponents. The potency of these abilities combined with the constant uptime led to one of the most controversial and oppressive metas in the game's history. Even after multiple nerfs and further tunings, Titans with the Whisper of Rhyme fragment became a nuisance in competitive modes as stacking multiple of them led to near infinite crystal uptime, shard generation, and overshields, making prolonged engagements frustrating at the least. Beyond Stasis, Beyond Light brought popularity to scout rifles for maybe the first time since the Mida multi-tool in Season 1. The Dead Man's Tail was the first of its kind. The draw came from its high road ability to function like an accurate scout rifle from long distances, and then as a Last Word 2.0 when firing from the hip. This weapon quickly became a fan favorite for those able to take advantage of its skill ceiling because of the catalyst that increased its damage profile and rate of fire when firing from the hip. The gun's ability to take long and close range fights gave players an edge in game modes where adaptability was king, and this thing was everywhere in the Crucible. Beyond Light also saw the rise of special ammo linear fusion rifles, especially with the introduction of Lorentz Driver. This exotic energy weapon had high damage output and even higher forgiveness, granting the user headshots at both long and closer ranges where the gun had no business operating. And if that wasn't enough, it also granted you wall hacks and a vortex upon kills that was strong enough to pull in other players and chain multi-kills. The popularity of this weapon with its wall hacks became especially prevalent in 3v3 modes, where one shot could instantly end the round as you followed your target through the map. The Arbalist linear fusion rifle became the next best choice if you simply wanted a primary slot version of Lorentz. The aim assist and magnetism on Arbalist was just as forgiving and could frequently outduel snipers. While the weapons of this expansion certainly had their time to shine, the Beyond Light era was mostly defined by the introduction of Stasis and the subclass 3.0 system, along with the challenges that it brought to light in PvP such as ability uptime and efficacy. And with the Light subclass reworks just around the corner and the next expansion, Witch Queen, this would be far from the last time that subclass abilities would dominate the Crucible. Witch Queen brought a lot of fresh content and new weapons, but most notably it also reworked the original 3 Light subclasses, updating them to the 3.0 system that we experience today. The first subclass to receive its rework upon launch was Void. While Hunters and Titans explored their new kits, Hunters immediately found a new home with the updated invisibility system. Invisibility in the Crucible was not a new concept, however with the 2.0 subclass system, you had to sacrifice some super viability and more offensive based capabilities in order to increase your neutral game. The rework of Void into the 3.0 system though allowed Hunters to have their invisible cake and eat it too. Now they could manipulate the radar with smoke bombs, suppress or outright kill opponents with selectable supers, and most importantly chain invisibility kills, especially when combined with exotics like the original Gerfalcon's Hallberg. This chest piece allowed Hunters to break invisibility and ambush their opponents, gain a bonus to weapon damage, and then an overshield and increased ability regeneration. This allowed Hunters to become invisible once again. The cherry on top of this gameplay loop was the Aspect Stylish Executioner, which allowed Hunters to gain wall hacks briefly after getting a precision kill while invisible. Gerfalcons would eventually receive a rework, however this wasn't the last time that invisible Hunters would be a problem. An alternate and even more popular option was another exotic chest piece, the Omni Oculus. This armor piece would give Hunters an additional smoke bomb, return smoke bomb energy when making allies invisible, and grant a 25% damage resistance inside of PvP, making most weapons require several additional shots to kill them. This was frequently combined with the Lord of Wolves shotgun. The alternate fire mode on this gun would allow the lethal range to challenge even the Chaperone with Roadborne active. However, this wasn't a slug shotgun and didn't require any of the accuracy needed like Chaperone. The competitive PvP playlists were soon overwhelmed with invisible players and burst firing shotguns, as this was a guaranteed way to dominate your close quarter engagements. The only way that players seemed to be able to counter the close range dominance of Lord of Wolves was with special weapons capable of one-shotting at mid-range. Enter fusion rifles. Fusion rifles were quickly gaining popularity in the Crucible as Bungie had changed their damage profiles and projectile properties. This made them more into hit scan style weapons. One fusion rifle in particular stood out, the Main Ingredient. Its stability and damage increasing perks could one-shot opponents at ranges that didn't even seem possible. This problem was only exacerbated when Xur sold a god-rolled Main Ingredient, giving everyone who played the game access to this low-effort, high-reward weapon, and forever changing its name to the Xur's Ingredient. High damage, high range special weapons wouldn't be the main grudge of PvP for long though, as continued updates to the remaining Light subclasses would bring metas of their own. Beyond Light certainly wasn't the last that players saw of Stasis, as Hunters received a new pair of gauntlets called the Renewal Grasps. These gauntlets provided stacking levels of damage resistance while you and your allies stood in the wearer's Duskfield Grenade, and it simultaneously decreased the damage of opponents standing in the radius. These gauntlets could be combined with the Fragment Whisper of Chains, which further reduced incoming damage when standing next to frozen targets or friendly crystals. Hunters became capable of taking insane amounts of damage, even a sniper headshot, and made them nearly incontestable on zones and choke points. As we saw earlier, Void 3.0 wouldn't be the only subclass to subject PvP to the power of its reworks. Solar 3.0 would be the following subclass to receive its updates, bringing in a significant shift in the PvP playstyle. The rework of Solar heavily emphasized healing, damage over time, explosions, and ability chaining. It rewarded an aggressive, albeit tactical playstyle. Healing grenades and restoration allowed players to quickly regain health and gain the upper hand in a duel. Other buffs like Radiant increased weapon damage, heavily increasing the one-shot kill potential of special weapons, and increasing forgiveness on primary weapons. Titans became nearly unkillable briefly with the aid of the Loreley Splendor helmet because of the constant sunspot healing. Warlocks ruled the skies with heat rises and a myriad of healing abilities, and Hunters leveraged Scorch and Ignition mechanics to chain multi-kills using grenade options and throwing knives. The last subclass to receive a rework would be Arc 3.0. Titans ruled the Crucible this time with Heart of Inmost Light enhanced Storm and Lightning grenades. They had Juggernaut overshields and would chain melee kills with Knockout and Dune Marchers. The high mobility, melee lethality, and overshield capabilities turned many players to Titan if they favored more of an in-your-face playstyle. Bungie also brought back some desire to play in the competitive arena once again with the reintroduction of Rose as the only remaining lightweight frame hand cannon in the game, now with randomly rolled perks. This allowed players to move quickly with the bonus to the mobility stat and an excellent perk package. It's no wonder why it instantly became a fan favorite weapon among hand cannon lovers. The reworks brought by Witch Queen provided players with more tools and playstyle customization than ever before, leading to a more diverse and dynamic environment for better or for worse. The broader range of viable builds and strategies made the Crucible heavily built around ability uptime, making engagements less predictable and more chaotic. This would carry directly into Lightfall and would be further amplified with the introduction of our second Darkness subclass. By this time, Bungie had learned from their mistakes of shipping Stasis far too hot and released the second Darkness subclass Strand in a much more balanced state. Strand quickly became popular for its heavy focus on mobility, crowd control, and user creativity to disrupt engagements and add a new layer of verticality to the Crucible. Close-range engagements became much more chaotic as players would pull one another from behind cover and suspend them in midair. This could potentially turn the tide on an otherwise bleak outcome. Strand wouldn't be without its moments though, however, as new aspects allowed hunters to generate clones that provided several benefits, including radar manipulation, portable cover, and threadling generation upon destruction. This aspect, combined with the exotic chess piece 6 Coyote, allowed teams of hunters to generate an army of threadlings and clones that became particularly annoying in competitive modes. Unlike Witch Queen, whose metas were primarily defined by each update to the light-based subclasses, Lightfall had much more weapon-focused metas with armor pieces aiding as they had always done. SMGs ruled the Crucible for much of Lightfall's beginning. The Ikelos SMG reissued in the last season of Witch Queen saw an early rise in popularity, and its unique perk Seraph rounds gave it much more range than its aggressive frame counterparts. Additionally, it benefited from the sweeping stability changes, allowing it to contest weapons extending way into auto rifle ranges. The Ikelos SMG wouldn't be the only popular option among players though. A perk called Target Lock, which increased the amount of damage your weapon would output the longer you remained on target, would soon propel two other SMGs into the limelight. The Immortal and Unending Tempest became some of the most popular weapons in the Crucible. Target Lock reduced their time to kill without needing any additional help from buffs like Radiant. SMG dominance would be further emphasized on Titans with access to the exotic boots Peacekeepers. These would instantly reload your stowed SMG, maxing out handling and improving your strafe speed while aiming down sights. As we saw before from previous metas, primary weapons are often complemented by their special weapon counterparts. The combination of two weapons allows for hybridization of gameplay, making them effective in a broad set of circumstances. Two special weapons that complemented this aggressive SMG playstyle were the snipers Defiance of Yasmin and Cloud Strike. Cloud Strike could heavily punish entire teams for making a mistake, since its exotic perk would create a high damage lightning strike on precision hits and kills. With a single bullet, you could wipe out an entire team in the blink of an eye. Defiance of Yasmin, which was reintroduced with the reworked King's Fall raid, was popular for its high aim assist, handling, and craftability, which gave it access to enhanced perks and customization depending on your playstyle. Yasmin certainly wouldn't be the only raid weapon to make its presence known in PvP though. The Lightfall expansion brought a new raid, and with it, a new raid exotic weapon. Conditional Finality was a shotgun with a unique design that fired stasis pellets that could instantly freeze a target on its first hit, and solar pellets on its second shot that could trigger ignitions. The extreme range and handling of this weapon made it a very popular pick for everyday play. It was also great against zone control supers like Well of Radiance and Bubble, which made it a go-to option in competitive game modes like Trials of Osiris. As Lightfall neared its end, Bungie would once again make a sweeping balance pass across weapons like auto rifles, trying to give them more of an established identity and role in medium range engagements. However, these changes benefited the 450 RPM auto rifles a bit more than their counterparts, and this led to an auto rifle dominated meta where their damage profile reached way outside of intended ranges. This meta also ushered in another hectic weekend, harkening back to the original laser tag weekend. By slowing down the client-side connection to Bungie servers, players could craft Frankenstein weapons by adding perks or frames of weapons together. Probably the most popular pick of this event was an aggressive frame shotgun being forced into a 450 auto rifle, the Ahmed AR-2. By combining these two frames together, players could create an auto rifle that fired like a shotgun, but at auto rifle ranges and fire rates. While this wasn't a meta that lasted more than about a weekend, it was still one of the most memorable times in the Lightfall era of PvP. This brings us up to the final expansion of the 10-year Light and Darkness saga, the Final Shape. Instead of adding a new unique subclass, Bungie opted to allow players to glue various pieces of existing subclasses together in the new Prismatic subclass system. The PvP landscape is still in its infancy as we make this video, but that doesn't mean that established metas haven't already made themselves well known. Warlocks were given a new exotic helmet, the Speaker's Sight, which converted their healing grenades into healing turrets. Initially, this turret produced orbs in PvP, which became a huge problem. This was a short-lived meta as Bungie quickly removed the orb generation from healing teammates in PvP, however, this would make way for a new subclass Prismatic to shine. Many players felt that Hunters received the biggest benefits from Prismatic since many of the most useful and lethal options from other subclasses could now be combined into one amazing kit. They have great mobility, ways to manipulate the radar, and excellent grenades. Meanwhile, they have access to multiple powerful supers, including the new Arc super that allows them to rapidly travel across the map, wiping out entire groups of enemies. Knucklehead Radar received a rework that has dramatically boosted up its popularity to levels not seen since vanilla Destiny 2. And a high-impact pulse rifle, the LC's rifle, was introduced just before the Final Shape and has become a dominant force in the Crucible as a great package of lethality, range, and forgiveness. I'm curious to hear from you, what are your favorite and least favorite metas that you remember from this list? Be sure to let me know in the comments and also subscribe if you haven't yet. Next up, check out my video on 43 things that only Destiny veterans remember. It's linked on screen and in the description.